Alright, at this point in time, you should have tried these last few on your own, and now you're just watching the video to check your answers and kind of follow along and see how you did. So when C and D are next to each other, when we have variables next to each other, that means to multiply. And so in this case, C is -3 and D is 5, so we've got -3 times 5. Our multiplying and dividing rules tell us that if signs are different, our answer is going to be negative. And 3 times 5 is 15. So CD equals -15. Number 17 says the opposite of CD. And so knowing what we just did, we really could just take the opposite of -15 and get 15. But let's plug in our numbers and just see if it works still. We've got the opposite of -3, which the opposite of -3 is +3. And then times 5, 3 times 5, they're both positive, so my answer is positive 15. The next one, we've got a fraction bar, and the fraction bar tells us to divide. So on this one, we can just plug in -3 over 5. Because it's a fraction in simplest form, we could leave it as -3 fifths, and I'm okay with that. Or if you recognize the decimal here and you want to actually divide and get the decimal answer, it would be 0 and 6/10. And that's just one of the common fractions and decimals that I would kind of expect you to have memorized, or eventually we will memorize them when we get to our fraction and decimal units. The opposite of D divided by C, well, the opposite of D is -5, and the opposite, or just C, is -3. Because we have a negative divided by a negative, our answer does need to be positive. So this is equal to +5/3. And I would take +5/3 or 1 and 6/10 repeating. Either of those answers would work. But we definitely don't want to leave two negatives here. We want the negatives to cancel out and become positive. Because we know that a negative divided by a negative is a positive. And this just looks cleaner. On the very last one, we are going to have to use order of operations. So C is -3 plus D over the opposite of C. So 5 over the opposite of -3 is +3. So we've got -3 plus 5/3. We are going to have to convert 5/3 to a decimal. Or we're going to have to convert -3 to a fraction. I don't care which one you do. The first thing I'll convert it to a decimal first. 5/3 we just recognized as 1 and 6/10 repeating. And this one is tricky. This would be more like a bonus question on your test or quiz. But -3 plus 1 and 6/10 repeating. Now we're getting into decimal rules, and this really isn't irrational. So yeah, this is definitely a bonus question for you guys at this point in time. But signs are different, so we're going to subtract. And when we do, we get 1, and if you have the decimal awareness, you know the opposite of 6/10 repeat, or the other part to 6/10 repeating is 1, or is 3/10 repeating. And then we keep the sign with a greater absolute value, which is negative. So -1 and 3/10 repeating, or we could have taken this -3 plus 5/3. We could have put -3 over 1 plus 5/3 and made them have a common denominator, so -9 plus 5/3. And when we do that, -9 and 5 are opposite, so we subtract 9 minus 5 is 4, and then we keep our denominator the same, and we keep the sign with the greater absolute value. In this case, that's -9/3, so we get -4/3. And if you're familiar with common decimals and fractions, you'll recognize that both of those answers are equal to one another, and understand that either one of them will be okay.